Episode 174, Turning to the Lord When Faced with Divorce, with Jenn Zingmark.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a highly trained, experienced life coach making a great impact in the lives of their clients. And together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with a coach? Here we go.
Divorce is never easy, and when a spouse has not lived up to commitments and promises that were expectations going into the marriage, the loss can be even more profound. Coach Jenn Zingmark is on the podcast today discussing what she has learned having gone through a divorce, and most importantly, how her life has been richly blessed post-divorce by turning to the Lord for help and support. Jenn knows that divorce can either drive you to God or away from Him, and she helps our listeners as well as her clients learn how God is the source of your greatest strength through divorce. If you or someone you know is going through a divorce or still struggling with the effects of divorce, reach out to Jenn and let her help you see the hope and healing that can take place post-divorce. Enjoy this episode.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, everyone. We're glad you're here today, and I am joined by Coach Jenn Zingmark today. Hi, Jenn. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. It's nice to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you and happy to have this conversation. I have not had Jenn on the podcast before, so we've just been chit-chatting for quite a while. We finally had to say, okay, we have to get going here with the task at hand, but it's so nice to just get to visit for a few minutes. Jenn, I would love people to kind of get an introduction to you, even though I have already gotten that. I would love them to be able to hear a little bit about you. So can you introduce yourself for us?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. I am a Southern girl, born and raised in South Carolina, and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I have a story, I think, that's similar to most people. I went off to BYU and got married at a young age, and I spent the next 11 years in a really difficult marriage, and I found myself divorced at 30 years old with 3 young children. And it really became a pivotal point in my life. You know, I've always been this quote unquote good girl who done all the right things. And here I was in this situation that was just devastating for me and overwhelming. And, I'd always been a stay-at-home mom up to that point. And then I had concerns about how I was going to support myself and my children. And it really was just a pivotal point in my life where I had to decide, like, what do I believe here? Do I believe all these things I've been taught? And, I've done everything I could to honor those covenants that I made and hold my family together, and it didn't work. And I had to do a lot of soul searching and really sort of dig deep and figure out how I was going to handle that crisis when I found myself in that situation. And it really became a pivotal point for me. I decided I had devoted my life to my faith and my family, and I wasn't going to give up then. I was like, you know what? I'm going to trust the Lord, and I'm going to dig in my roots, and I'm going to stay strong and faithful. And I'm going to hold on to those covenants that I've made and those eternal promises that I have from Heavenly Father, and just keep going. And so I held my head up high and I took my little kids to church, and I lived on faith for a while. Like, I didn't know where the income was going to come from, but I trusted God knew there was a way, and He provided a way. I just really learned that I could trust Him, and that when my life looked a whole lot different than I ever imagined that it would, that there was still a plan. I didn't know what it was, but I knew Heavenly Father did. And I just learned to trust Him and to keep going. And, that was about 20 years ago now. I ended up getting remarried, and my husband that I remarried had also been divorced. He had a daughter from his previous marriage. So with my 3 kids and his daughter, we joined our families together and we had a baby. And so then we started down that road of blended family. And that was 19 years ago this year. And it hasn't been like a beautiful, easy walk in the park. I will definitely tell you the truth. It's been hard. It's been challenging. Blended families and exes and legal battles and child support and alimony and all the things that divorced people deal with. We have dealt with all of those things. But it has been possible and it has been wonderful, beautiful and tragic, but wonderful. And it really led me to really have a mission to help other people through divorce. It sort of happened organically at first. Like my stake president was like, you need to talk to Jenn. You need to talk to Jenn. This was 20 years ago and there wasn't social media and there weren't support groups and support and there weren't open conversations about addiction and a lot of the things that we talk about today that cause marriages to end. And I ended up helping a lot of other people sort of one at a time and mentoring people through divorce and just sort of helping them stay strong and get through. And that sort of led me to life coaching. And when I found life coaching, I was like, this is it. This is the tools and the skills that I need to teach other people. I feel like I figured out a lot of things on my own and with the Lord's help and just reading all the self-help books that I could and using my psychology background, but I really loved finding the tools of life coaching to help other people be empowered, right? To have those skills and tools to help them get through it. And so when I found that, I was like, this is it. This is my calling. Like, I know this is right for me. And it's just been such a real honor and a privilege to be able to help other people in this way.
I love it. I think you probably felt like I did. Like there were so many things you knew, but this, like the tools that we learned just kind of gives us a language, the language that we needed to be able to say and do the things that we know are possible for people to do, right? It just gives us the words and
Yes,
the
that
kind
is
of
exactly how
organization.
I felt. Learning the model, learning very specific tools to teach someone, and really to teach them to become empowered. I feel like I figured that out somehow, like, this is up to me. How I'm going to respond to this is up to me. I get to decide if I'm going to be miserable and bitter and angry because I had seen people who were divorced like that 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, still talking about their ex. And I was like, I don't want to be like that. I'm not going to be like that. But it wasn't easy. It was hard to forgive things that had happened. And I had been betrayed and my heart was broken and, covenants were broken. And I had these little children with broken hearts, wanting their dad. And there's so many hard things. And yeah, I really was so grateful to find the tools of coaching to help teach other people to be empowered to control their own lives. Like you have that power. And I love that. That's my favorite thing about life coaching and teaching other people. It's like you have so much more power than you know.
Yeah. I'm the phrase you used, I think you said it was tragic and beautiful, or it is tragic and beautiful. But the other key word that you said in there was that it's possible. Like the word possible to me really stood out because I think sometimes we just get so stuck in the mire of, just all the pain, of all the tragic part of it that we start to think that what I wanted in life, what I thought I was going to have is not possible anymore.
Yeah, and it's a slippery slope
Mhm.
because we put so much hope and faith into making those covenants and choosing the right and staying on that path, and it's really hard not to become disillusioned
Mhm.
and really lose your faith and question your testimony. And I've seen a lot of people actually start out strong in that journey, even, they didn't choose the divorce and it was their spouse that chose it and they were going to stay strong and then lose that because it's a hard thing whether you want to be divorced or not, whether it's your choice or not. Going through a divorce it's life changing, and it changes everything about you, about how you see yourself, your ideas about your future. So many things change. And I really, that's part of what drove me to want to help other people is watching many people start out strong with determination and conviction to stay faithful even, beyond their divorce and then lose that drive
Mhm.
because it's challenging. And I feel like Satan really comes after you when you go through a challenge like this and you're vulnerable, you're alone, and you don't have that person, you don't have that companion anymore to help you get through the struggles of life. And, you're disappointed and upset about the way things have gone. And you're just in a vulnerable place. And without support and tools and the knowledge really that it's possible, you can. And I tell people this all the time. You can have a better life than the one you had before. If you're like me and you had a very challenging, difficult marriage from day one, you may not know that it's possible to have a happy marriage,
Mhm.
that you can have a better life than the one you had before if you believe that you can. And I try to live as an example of what's possible. Like it is possible. My life isn't perfect. My marriage isn't perfect. We're real and we're still working through struggles every day, all the time, using these tools. But it is possible to have a beautiful, happy, rewarding, fulfilling life that's better than what you had before after divorce.
Yeah, faith and hope, kind of like those two things. And it's not surprising, I think, when people start, when they're in that situation, or really any hard situation, when if they start to lose those things. So I mean, I don't think that it's not surprising, right? Because it's such a challenge to be able to maintain that. There's so many questions, there's so many doubts, there's so many, how could he allow
Mhm.
this? I'm assuming questions that kind of come up. I'm just curious then, how do members of the Church of Jesus Christ not only deal with maintaining hope in these areas, but also have hope about like the core doctrines of the church, like eternal marriage and families? Because I'm sure that's so much of what we speak about in the church. And I think we've gotten better at integrating that, like kind of this, what you said, like there were a lot of things that were not even available to you,
Mhm.
that are now. But how do we deal with that? How do we help people deal with that?
Yeah, I honestly feel like it's part of our maturing process going through life. We all experience devastating, heartbreaking things throughout our lives, like the death of a loved one and possibly never marrying and disappointments that we can't anticipate. And when those come up, we have to really address opposing doctrines like agency and eternal marriage, right? Like those
Mhm.
things, the Lord always honors our agency. And when one person chooses to no longer honor those covenants, no longer want to participate in an eternal marriage, what are you left with, right? Like that other person is there. They're honoring, they're hoping, they're praying and fasting many times for their spouse to overcome an addiction or have the desire to want to stay faithful in a marriage. And when someone chooses otherwise, it is heartbreaking and devastating, but the Lord is still there. That's what I have found, and that's what I really try to offer to my clients and to the world, that there is still hope in those eternal covenants even when people we love choose otherwise, that we can trust God. He's still honoring those covenants. And if we are still honoring those covenants, we are still entitled to and worthy of those blessings, and they will come. Maybe not immediately, maybe not even in this life, but we have to hold on to those promises and believe with all of our soul that they will come eventually. And
Mhm.
we don't know when that is, but it's through those difficult trials that we really find out, what do I really believe? Like I said in my story, when it came down to it, I recognized this is my choice. How am I going to respond to this? I didn't get to choose what my spouse would decide ultimately, but I got to choose how I would respond to it. And choosing to hold on to those covenants, trust God, even when I didn't see a way, I couldn't see one step forward. I just took the step into the darkness and held on with all of my heart and soul to those covenants and the promises God had given me and trusted He would provide the way, and he did. And I know that he will do that for everyone that does that. I've seen that in my life and many, many other people's lives, but it's a scary time. It's a scary thing to take that step.
Yeah. Those opposing, the gospel, like you said, is full of opposites basically. And I had somebody, one of our high counselors spoke one time and he's like, the gospel is full of healthy tension. Like there's opposites. We have to make choices, and that's why we're here. And I think that the principle of agency is so important here because like both sides here, right? Like your ex-husband used his agency, his God-given agency, right? Like that he used it in a different way than you did, but you still had agency to be able to choose what you were going to do. And we all have that gift and we all get to learn how to use it. And I think it does take time. I think one of the greatest things I've learned from coaching is that we have agency, but we have to really learn what that means and how to use it. Like I used to just think it was, I get to choose whether I'm going to do this or whether I'm going to do that. And yes, we get choices in our actions, but it really starts with what we're going to choose to think about a situation. And when we look at that, we see that we have so much power
Yes.
in our choices.
Yeah.
And
I agree. That is
yeah.
the most powerful thing I think I've learned through life coach training is that our agency begins with our thoughts. And that's the most powerful choices we can make in our lives when we're dealing with disappointment and divorce. It's how are you going to choose to frame your past, to look forward in your future, because it all is up to you
Mhm.
depending on how you want to think about your situation. And it's interesting. One of the advantages I have now in hindsight is I can clearly see I was delivered. That heartbreaking divorce that I experienced, and even as traumatic as it was, looking at my past, my path since then, and the path of my ex-spouse, like I am so grateful I was delivered from that lifetime of misery and sorrow, really. And I haven't had that. I've had trials, yes, but I have remarried and I really continued on the same plan that I had for my life. I always wanted an eternal family. I wanted to stay faithful in the gospel and raise my family in the gospel. And I was able to do that with a partner that also wanted those things.
Mhm.
The partner that I had in my first marriage, he never chose those things ever again. And I can look back now with the wisdom of time and recognize that was such a blessing. I was delivered from that situation and was able to continue on in the life that I really did want. It looked different than what I thought it would. It wasn't the same, picture that I had in mind, but it is the same path.
Yeah. And I'm certain it didn't feel like deliverance when you were going
No,
through
no.
it.
No, it didn't. It did not. It felt painful and horrible and like the most tragic thing that had ever happened to me.
Mhm.
But because I have had that experience, I'm able to speak to other people and offer, especially when I see similar situations, and offer them that same encouragement that one day you may look back and recognize you have been delivered from. Many times I have found that as members of the church, we hold on and stay in marriages a long time, a long time. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I don't regret one day that I stayed and continued praying and hoping and trying. I feel like when you do that, you walk away confidently. I
Mhm.
know I gave it my all, 110%, every opportunity. And so I always encourage everyone to do that. If both people are willing, you stay in and you keep trying, you keep forgiving, you keep loving, and you keep helping if both people are willing. But when one person decides it's over and there's no more, then you can walk away confident that you gave it your all. And there is a peace that comes from that that you cannot replace.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that there is something, well, there's just power in that, right? Like that's part of just knowing that that you've given your all. And that in itself is, no matter what the situation is so hopeful for us, because
Yeah. And
you
so
have.
for other people, when they come to me and they're heartbroken and devastated and by the marriage ending, and then, I learn the many, many, many horrible things they've had to deal with and accept. And I can say, one day you will recognize you have been delivered from these burdens that are not yours any longer. You have been carrying your spouse's burdens, praying and hoping and being strong for them, and trying to hold everything together. Many times I tell people, you've been a single parent, the spiritual leader of your home, many, many years. You will just now be stepping into recognizing
Yeah.
that your position as the spiritual leader, single parent, soul person, but you've been in that role
Yeah.
much longer than you realized. And that burden, you will feel when that burden is gone, you will be grateful that it's gone. It's hard to see that initially.
Yeah, I was going to say, which probably does not offer them much peace in the moment, right? But it probably gives them an inkling of hope, like just gives them the ability to just take another step.
Yes. And I hope
Yeah.
it plants a seed. Like,
Mhm.
I like to say, imagine a life where you don't worry about that. You're not suspicious. You're not checking history and wondering where they are and what they're doing, and worried all the time about their behavior, right? You can be free of that and no longer care. And that freedom comes beautifully when you have that peace. That's
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking about checking, like checking this is going to be a different context, but you're talking about checking up or making sure that things are going the way that they're supposed to be. I'm like, I kind of want to swing around to like that checklist that we have. I think we kind of think that we have, like, I refer to it as like the law of Moses, where we think we've got to check all these boxes. We got to do this and this and this and this. And if we do, everything will work out just fine. I think two parts here. You probably lived to see that, no, when you, just because you follow that checklist does not make it mean that everything's going to turn out just fine.
Mm-hmm.
That probably is a lot of what brings on like the loss of faith and the loss of hope, the starting of questions and doubts. I would assume, like, I did all these things, how come this?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
For
so there's,
sure.
yeah, so there's that, but then there's also like, just because you've done those things, like you've checked off those boxes, there, I have got to think there has to be some hope in having done that in the first place, right?
Mm.
Like, it's not for naught. It's not like it's just doesn't matter. There's a reason. I don't know. Can you speak to that a little bit? Did I make any sense in how I asked that question?
Yes, I think so. I definitely relate to that feeling of I did all the right things. I married a nice young man I met in my BYU ward who was an AP on his mission, and we got married in the temple, right? Like I checked all those boxes and I stayed faithful to my covenants and to him, and he chose otherwise. And there is definitely some disillusionment and disappointment and heartbreak that comes along with recognizing I've checked all those boxes, and why isn't my life turning out? What is happening? Right. And for me, that going through that whole process helped me understand very early on, long before I found life coaching, that I'm only responsible for me, right? Taking care of your own needs inside of marriage. Like I started understanding that long before I got a divorce, because I thought there was a time when I thought, if I fast again, if I pray again, if I read another book about pornography addiction, that's going to help and I'll help him. And I finally got to the point where I recognized all of these things I'm doing, they're not changing him, they're changing me. And that's why we do the checklist
Mm-hmm.
for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? They were bringing me peace. I was going to the temple. I started attending the temple regularly, and I was my safety, my refuge, where I found peace and hope. And I recognized it's not helping him. I'm putting his name on the prayer roll, and but it was nothing. I come home, I'm like, feel different, feel better. He's like, no. I'm like, I did though. So that's why you do the checklist, right? It was changing me. It was helping me. And all the while, my faith was growing. My testimony was growing. And I was understanding, even before I was able to articulate it, I can only be responsible for me. I can't be responsible for him. I can't fix him the way I wanted to. I can't change his behavior, but I can hold on to my covenants with God. Those are still intact. And I'm trusting and holding on to them. And I'm going to keep doing everything I can to be worthy of those and entitled to those. And I'm going to keep checking off all the things that help me feel close to God, because I know I could trust God. As I was recognizing I could no longer trust my ex-spouse, I was like, well, I'm just going to trust the Lord. That's who I can trust. So for me, that checklist, it really was important for me because it was providing me with the comfort and the growth in my testimony that I needed, that when he stepped away, I recognized I had grown stronger in that time. And it wasn't because he was leading me or he was helping me. It was because I was actually becoming more independent from him and not relying on my ex-husband to take care of my spiritual needs, mental, emotional needs. I was doing that and relying on the Lord for that.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it amazing the shift that happens when that checklist, and I don't even like to use the word checklist, but I think people relate to that, so I'll use it. But when it goes from something that we should do or we have to do to, oh, this is something that I actually really want to do because my life is different when I do these things. And the things on that list are different for everybody, right? Like scripture study is going to look different for everybody. Saying our prayers and pondering, that looks different for everybody. But when you figure out what it is for you, there is something that shifts that's so amazing and powerful in our lives.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I would say holding on to those things, holding on to my covenants, it was everything for me. It was everything. It made all the difference.
I love how you said you were creating your own refuge. You were creating your safe space because that's truly that's what it is. That's what we're doing. Okay. And as a side note, can we just have a quick like, I don't know. I feel like we have to get away from thinking that just because somebody has done all these things doesn't mean that they're going to continue doing them for the rest of their life. Or I think we have kind of like this stigma in the church, well, that kid didn't serve a mission, so he must not be, or this person, she didn't go on a mission. I don't know. I just think there's something to be said for recognizing that the things that somebody chooses to do or not do in their life doesn't always mean that they are going to continue to be the person that I don't know what I'm trying to say
Yeah,
without
I
saying it
get
in a
that.
negative way.
Mhm.
I just think we need to have our eyes open. We don't need to just like think of the story like this is how, if you do these things, that person, that just because he served a mission or he was the AP didn't mean, obviously in your case, that he was
Oh,
going to be that for the rest of his life, right? That he was gonna.
no. Yeah, and I
And
think more than ever now, we have to recognize that you can't use that checklist or those set things like they're a retired missionary or
mhm.
they went to BYU or whatever that status is that we think we can put stock in, that you really just have to trust the Lord and listen to the Spirit. And there are going to be challenges and trials that come up in every person's life and in every marriage, regardless of their stats when you get
Mhm.
married, regardless
I
of
love the stats. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, regardless of what their stats look like, right? Yeah, or
Yes,
you're a
yes,
baseball mom,
yes,
like
yes.
it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what their batting average is. They're going to hit a slump. Things are going to get bad. There's going to
Mhm.
be weather problems. Like there are going to be problems in everyone's life. Honestly, what I teach my young adult children now that aren't married is pay attention to how they handle problems. How do they handle challenging situations? How do you handle those? Do you turn towards God? Do you lean in to your faith or away? I think that's a better indication of where someone is spiritually.
Oh, I think that that is fantastic and such great advice. And you answered my muddled up question in a perfect way without me trying to say, okay. Sometimes people just turn into a mess, even though they've done all the things. is what I
That's
was trying not to say. And then I just said it. So anyway,
true.
I just think it's important for us not to always put stock in those stats, right? Like just because somebody did serve a mission or didn't serve a mission, because I think we're having more and more kids who are choosing not to. And I appreciate that they're willing to say, listen, like, I don't feel like this is my path and I could continue and maintain and be a person of faith and not do that.
Mhm.
Anyway, I don't know. That's
Yeah,
mine.
I think that it's hard to do that. And I really respect people that choose that, just like it's hard to be divorced in the church
Yeah.
and show up at church as a single mom with your 3 kids and say, I'm divorced and hold your head up high. I think it's a challenge in the church today is we have these stigmatisms about people that they're divorced or
Mhm.
they didn't serve a mission or whatever those labels are that we need to let go of and just try to see people and love people and recognize that even without a label, everyone is dealing with challenges. Everyone has made mistakes in their lives. Maybe they don't have to wear it like a divorce where your children have a different last name than you when you get remarried. That's a hard thing. That is
Mhm.
it's one of those sensitive things that are hard to deal with. But if we can be more compassionate with people when they are in that situation, it's just better for everyone when we just stop judging and using those labels to define people.
It is such a tricky balance between like we teach principles of happiness, like if you do these things, you'll be happy. And of course, that's true. But also, the right journey is different for everybody, and
Yeah.
we have to be willing. That is one of the principles of the gospel too, right? Is agency. And so we get to allow other people their agency and know that God is always working in their favor regardless of what they're doing. He's always giving them the good that they need, and our job is just to allow that and to love people through their process.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to know, how have you seen the Lord make your life more beautiful than you ever thought possible after your divorce? And I know you've kind of seeded this through a little bit, but I
Yeah.
just would like to have you, I'd like to hear your answer to that.
Yeah. I would say that life, no matter what your path looks like, has so many lessons for us to learn. There's so many opportunities for us to step up and grow our faith. I like to say that it's a muscle, and sometimes it can't grow unless those fibers are broken down and torn. And sometimes that means your life is torn apart. And sometimes that means divorce. For me, it did. And for many of us, it takes those life-changing situations for you to figure out what it what you're really made of and grow your faith enough to get you through the next difficult situation. But there are so many lessons that we can learn from marriages that end and then take with you into your future relationships. That's something that I really have tried to learn for myself and help other people learn is even in, dealing with a spouse that has addiction or, struggles with any sort of problem, there are better ways that we can have more compassion and we can really learn from how we respond to challenges that were given in our life. And that's what I have seen is that process of repairing those tears in our lives, that repairing those broken relationships and broken families, if we trust the Lord to help us do that, we can build something more beautiful than what we had before. We can create, with the Lord's help, He will create something much more out of our lives than we even thought was possible out of those broken pieces of a marriage that ends in divorce or a family that's torn apart by divorce. And what we gain from it is more grit, more resilience, more faith, right? Like that's the whole purpose is we grow stronger in that process. And then the Lord makes something more beautiful out of the broken pieces of our lives than we could ever imagine. And that's what I have seen. And I testify of that every chance that I can get, is that as we trust the Lord, He will take those broken pieces of our lives and turn them into something beautiful. We trust Him to do that, and we
Mhm.
are willing to grow our faith in the process.
Yeah. One of my favorite, and I say this all the time, so people are going to have to just, I apologize for saying it again, but I think we get so confused in thinking that we're here on this earth to prove to God that we can be worthy of whatever it is that we need to be worthy of, right? Of returning to him. But I really believe in my heart of hearts that we're here because he's just trying to prove to us how capable we are, that we can do so much if we partner with him. We are so capable of doing so many things. And
Oh, I love that. That's
I,
beautiful. I agree. We don't know many times what we're capable of until we're
yeah,
pushed past our limits,
yeah,
right? We would stop well before the Lord's like, nope,
yes.
you can handle more.
Yes. And I think you have like shared that perfectly with us today, that he all along was just trying to prove to you, hey Jen, like you are so capable of this, and I've got you, right? I just think
Yeah,
it's so
I
amazing.
believe that. I do agree with that completely. And that's what I really try to share with other people,
Yeah.
is that you don't know this now, but you can. You are strong enough to handle this, and you can get past this and have a beautiful, better life on the other side of divorce. It's not a dark, miserable, terrible place. It could be a lot better, especially if you've been in a really difficult, challenging marriage. It can be so much better, and
Yeah.
it can be surprisingly beautiful and better than you imagined. And I
Yeah.
love helping people get a little glimpse of that hope, that it's not over. Your life is not over. There is happiness after divorce.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Okay, Jen, before we go, well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for having this conversation with me. But I also would love for you to be able to share with people where they can find more of you.
Okay, yes, thank you for having me. This has been lovely to be with you. So, my website is ldsdivorce.com. I also have a podcast, Joy and the Journey with Jen, that's released every week and it's free. I have a coaching program called Faith Filled Divorce, and I work with my clients for 1 year because I know divorce, it never ends, actually. But
Mhm.
that first year, that year is tough. And you can renew, you can stay in. I have several clients that are doing that. But I know all the obstacles that are coming up if you're going through divorce. Every situation is different, but there are so many things that are the same in this journey. Situations like telling your kids you're getting a divorce, or telling other people at church and in your work, I'm getting a divorce, and how to handle that, and how to, reframe your mindset to really look forward to the future when everything is a mess and you don't really know
Mhm.
how. Like, I cover everything in Faithful Divorce, and I love helping other people find hope, healing, and happiness after divorce. So thank you for having me and letting
Oh,
me share my story and my ministry.
I love it. And, as a side note too, I think that also within a year, you hit all of the things, right? You hit all of the seasons, you hit all of the holidays, which I'm certain have their own little package of hard things. And so
Yeah.
it just gives them a somebody to help them walk through the firsts of all of those things. So I think
Yeah.
that's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, and my purpose is to help people get to the joy
Hmm.
quicker and easier than I did.
Yeah.
Like I said, 20 years ago, there weren't the resources that there are now. And I feel like I figured out a lot of things and I know what's there, and I can help you handle each of these obstacles in the best way and give you support during that whole process, so that after that next year, you're like, wow, okay, I can do this. I have tools, I have skills, I have support. I'm going to be okay. And I feel like that's the best gift I can give someone dealing with
Oh,
divorce.
for sure. Ooh. All right. Well, I'm so glad that I get to help share you with the world, because I think we all need that. We all need everybody's individual ministries. I like that you said it that way, because everybody has
I'm a
something
Southern
unique.
girl.
I
Yes.
know. I know. We
Yes.
all have something unique to offer the world, and I love that you have found it. I mean, there's many unique things about you, but you've taken one of those things and ran with it. And what a gift that is to so many people. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you everybody who joined us today. And I know that you all know somebody who needs to have a little bit more Jenn in their life. So be sure to share this with those that you love who might be going through the same struggles that she went through. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Yep. We'll see you next time, everybody. Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.